Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker with A Healthcare Z, and this is the How to Get into Medical School podcast. Today's topic is extracurricular activities that will help you get into medical school. And I will cut right to the punchline. The answer is research. Yes, my friends, research. That is the extracurricular activity that is by far the most sought after and will look the best on your application to medical school. Now, we are now going to talk about why that is and how you can make the most of research for getting into med school. Now, this is for people that are either about to go into college or are currently in college, and research is typically in the form of a lab. Maybe you have quote unquote clinical research opportunities, but which would be like in a hospital or actually with people. But the vast majority of research opportunities for obviously very low level volunteer positions, or maybe it's very low wage positions, are going to be in a lab, and it can be done sort of concomitantly with school and with your studies. So it can sort of be mixed in a certain number of hours a week, or it can be done in the form of summer internships where you're working full time, let's say 40 hours a week or what have you, during your summer quote unquote break. You're doing your research then, or it could be a combination of the two. Now, I did my research over the summers. My research was not done during the school year, but I certainly knew many people who did do research during the school year. If you had to choose, if you had like an extra, let's just call it 4 hours in a week, and you could spend those 4 hours in a week doing volunteer lab work, or you could spend 4 hours making sure that you got good grades in your classes and good grades on your pre-med classes, then you should spend the time to get the grades. So to a certain extent, this extracurricular activity thing is assuming that you're already kind of maxing out your grades in your grade point average overall and your pre-med grades with the amount of time you're spending on it. And there's diminishing returns. I mean, I think that I got to a point where if I had spent another hour studying for organic chemistry or physics or whatever, I probably would not have gotten a better grade. I probably maxed it, and my absolute best might have been a B or a B plus or an A minus. I mean, it's just, for that quarter or for that subject matter, that's kind of where I maxed out. And that's okay. Now, I think that the lab opportunities over the summer, in my opinion, I think that's superior. Obviously, I'm biased because that's what I did. I did it over summer, not during the school year, because to a certain extent, you need to be able to have the social interaction. You need to be able to, blow off some steam through whatever, ways that you like to do that, whether it's talking with friends over coffee, or I was in a garage band in college, so we were doing Weezer and Green Day covers. I mean, whatever it is that you do for fun, you got to have the time for that. So if you do have during the school year an extra 4 hours a week with which to blow off some steam, and the expression is to sharpen your saw, right? You're just making your saw so dull by studying your brains out hours and hours a day that you need to do something to refresh yourself and sharpen your own saw. And you've got to do that to stay sane and to stay sort of mentally astute and sharp and healthy. And so if you have a choice between doing that and doing lab work, I would do that. I would sharpen the saw and not work in the lab. So it's like, 1, you got to study and get the grades. 2, you got to sharpen the saw. And 3, only after those first 2 things do you have quote unquote time for extracurriculars that are going to look better on your med school application. Okay. And so summer's a great time to do that, right? It's because all the schoolwork goes away. And I mean, There is a fantastic summer internship program at the National Institutes of Health. That's where I did my summer research. Now, I of course was fortunate because I lived in Maryland, so I was close by to the NIH. But they have plenty of host families, and a lot of the people in the labs will let people from all over the country stay with them over the summer. So it's not impossible to do if you live somewhere in the country to do research at the NIH, or you do research at one of the professors at your university. You ask them, hey, and you don't and you offer to do it for free. And if you've got to have the money, then you get a job that pays you money, and then you volunteer in your extra time, weekends, evenings, etc., to come into that lab. If you've got to work retail or mow lawns or whatever it is during the summer to make money. Now, that lab, what the actual research in that lab doesn't really matter too much. My particular research was on lipid droplets. It was on fat droplets in adipose cells, or what's called adipocytes or adipose cells, which are just fat cells. I studied fat cells through electron microscopy. So that is obviously in the realm of biology, but it could be, not like, it could be very basic science. Like, that's okay. The point is that, and here's why research is so important, is because when you're applying to medical schools are at universities. They're at academic medical centers. The people at academic medical centers, they love research. That's why they're there. Yes, they love teaching medical students. Yes, they love seeing patients. But the reason that they're there is because they love research. Research is what gets them published. Research is what gets them their promotions. Research is what gets them their recognition. Research is what gets them their tenure. So there is a heavy bias towards research. And because they're so interested in research, they're interested in applicants who are interested in research. So do it. Do it. There is nothing else that I can say other than do it. And you're like, well, I don't like research. Goes back to my previous podcast where I said, like, look, listen, you've got to do things that you don't like. Part of being a doctor is doing things that you don't like. Part of being a doctor is learning to find a way to like something about it. Find some way to like something about it. You don't like the research, try to find a lab that at least has some cool people in there where you like working with them. I had this one guy, Dan, in the lab. That guy was so much fun. The stuff that we were doing in the lab was that particular summer, because I did it multiple summers. The stuff that I was doing in the lab that particular summer was I was just pouring gels all summer. This is back before you could order like pre-formed gels. We had to pour our own gels. And this is what the scut work you do in a biology lab when you're young, is you just do the grunt work. I mean, I developed electron microscopy films I spent a summer in a darkroom developing films. Another summer I just was doing the pouring the gels. That's all I was doing. So, but it was great. I mean, because Dan was a great guy, so it was fun to hang out with. So the research that you do, the actual nature of the research you do, it's not what's important. The point is that you do it. You get in the lab, you get experience with it. You're gonna get you're gonna establish. You're gonna be a nice person. You're gonna go out of your way to be helpful for other people. You are going to, as a result of that, you're gonna have a good work ethic. You're gonna show up on time every day. You're going to stay throughout the day. You're not just going to like ditch at 2:00 in the afternoon. So you're going to put in an honest day's work, and you're going to get a great letter of recommendation out of it from the head of the lab. And it's totally worth it. Like, if you're in a financial position where you don't have to work and you can do it for free. Now, I actually got a paid lab position. I was very fortunate. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was a paid lab position. And if you can, if financially, whether it's, not paid very much or not paid at all, you're going to get a fantastic letter of recommendation from the head of that lab. And oftentimes the head of that lab is more than happy to write you a glowing letter of recommendation because you've helped them so much. You can totally add value to that lab. You're not a burden to them at all. And they're looking for enthusiastic, positive, energetic, quick learners. Like, if you don't know anything, that's fine. If you can come in with a positive attitude and enthusiasm and a strong work ethic, then that's like all you need. That's all you need. Like, you don't need to necessarily have, because you're just going to be pipetting and doing gels and yada yada anyway. So, like, it's, It's a lot like cooking. I'll just put it like that. So people say, oh, well, I want to be an EMT. Listen, medical schools are not necessarily going to be impressed by you working as an EMT. Say, oh, I want to be some sort of, essentially an orderly in a hospital. I'll wheel people around from floor to floor. Medical school, not going to be too impressed with that. Okay, so there's a difference between your extracurricular activities because you want to learn about what it's like to work in a hospital or work at a doctor's office, and an extracurricular activity that's going to help you get into medical school. And those are oftentimes two different things. Okay, so I spent one summer volunteering in the ER and pediatrics floor of my local community hospital so I could get more of a exposure to what clinical medicine, working in a hospital, what it was, being around patients, what it was like. But I don't think that was helpful in that the people on the admissions committee at medical school, they want to see that you've at least done things to like expose yourself to medicine so that you know that you actually like it, so that it's not theoretical. It's not some sort of like abstract, I want to be a doctor. It's like, okay, well, I've had experiences that are alongside doctors or doctor-esque or, yada, yada, yada. And because those experiences have reinforced my desire to become a physician, I'm still here and I want to become a physician. That's great. But that is not the type of extracurricular activity that's like, wow, this is impressive. This is going to make your application look better. What's going to make your application look better is the research. Okay, so get the point. Now, again, moving into the nuts and bolts of the research. What are the locations for the research opportunities? Number one is going to be at your own college or university. Again, either during the school year or over the summer. Now, it involves approaching the people in those labs. Now, how do you approach those professors? Well, listen, these professors, you go up to your professor at the end of class in your general chemistry freshman year lecture. You'd be like, hey, is there any way, or, all professors have office hours and students never go to the office hours. There's always open time at the office hours. No one ever goes. So if you don't want to talk to them after lecture, you talk to them during office hours. Like, hey, I want to work in your lab. And then talk through the process of what it would take to work in their lab. At one point in college, I had a couple of people ask me if I wanted to work in their lab just because I was in their office hours. I think they were lonely. I was like, no, I'm just here to ask a question about this problem set. I don't really have an interest in working in your lab. So they want people. So you get in there and you ask them. And so, don't be scared. Just, be like, there might be a process. Be like, hey, what's the process for potentially working in your lab over the summer? Now, you want to start doing that, I would say, in the winter. After you get back from winter break, that's a great time to start working on what are you going to do that summer. Okay. Now, if it's a more formal, it was the Howard Hughes program at the NIH that was the summer internship program that I was a part of. They had a more structured, formal application process, essay, yada, 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 your school transcript, because they had to look at your grades. So there obviously are those, and obviously you can just look on the internet for these sort of formal research programs, whether it be through the NIH or whether it be, through some other sort of, if you live in a different town than where you're going to college, my own personal opinion is that it's better to go where your college is and just not go home to your family for that summer. So you get, sublet an apartment for the summer and just stay there. Because you're already at that institution, you've already have an in because you go to school there. It's really hard to go be like, okay, well, now I'm going to work in a lab at a college that's near my home, but it's not the college that I go to. They're kind of more interested in helping their own students. They're not as much interested in you per se. And you don't need to have any family connections whatsoever to make this happen. I mean, you just need to approach these people with, again, a positive, enthusiastic attitude, willing to work and willing to show up and be responsible. That's kind of all it takes. Now, the work in the lab itself might not be your cup of tea, okay? Because people that want to oftentimes be physicians are oftentimes people. They want to help people, and they like being around people. They like communicating with people. And a lot of people that want to be doctors are into the sciences. They think science is fascinating, but they don't necessarily think that, but these are the same people that did not really like lab in general chemistry, organic chemistry, physics, and biology, right? Because all four of those have labs that you have to do in association with those classes. And like a lot of people who are pre-med, like they don't like the lab portion of it. They don't think because those labs, it's like very tedious cooking where you cannot eat the final product, right? You have these steps that you have to follow in a very meticulous order. They involve different instruments, like your different cooking utensils. They involve different ingredients. And like I think in organic chemistry, I think we made like aspirin one time, or I should say attempted to make aspirin one time. So it's not interesting for a lot of people. It wasn't interesting for me. And so again, it's a matter of taking lemons and turning it into lemonade. Okay, well, so fine. So the actual work that I'm doing in the lab is not necessarily like, if I had a choice with what I was doing with my time right now, maybe I would not be choosing this. But you're choosing it, again, it's delayed gratification. You're choosing it because you know that it's going to be helpful for getting into medical school. Okay, so fine. So it has a purpose. It has a function. Now you've got to find some way to make it enjoyable while you're doing it. And again, I would say that the interpersonal aspects of it, just learning how to get along with people that are not like you anyway is a super important skill for being a doctor. And that there might be people in the lab that like you have nothing in common with, but you find a way to get along with them, and you find a way to enjoy their company and, pass the time, whether it's telling stories or telling jokes or, baking cookies for each other. I mean, we had some other, summer interns in that lab that I didn't really have a lot in common with them. And, we didn't necessarily like get along great, but they were like big into like baking, and they would like bring in all these like stuff and it was like awesome. It was like really cool that they did that, and it gave us something to bond over. Was their really good cookies that they brought into the lab on a day where I was just pipetting or and then you also have to when you're doing the research, oftentimes there would be an opportunity to put together a poster. Where I did my research, the poster was not required. Do the poster. You want to absorb any and every learning opportunity. Oftentimes they'll have meetings or sort of mini conferences, whether it be once a week or twice a week. We would have one once a week. I think it was on like Tuesday mornings, where like a bunch of people from different labs would get together. Not a ton of people, like 15 people, sit around a conference table, talk about their research or experiments they've been running for the previous week. And I like 90% of the time I did not understand what they were talking about, but the 10% of the time that I did, it was like pretty interesting. So you gotta kind of search out these nuggets of just interest, of fun, of like, wow, that's really cool. And just know that those sort of moments, etc., they don't happen every day. They don't happen every week. Sometimes you got a few weeks together where nothing really like that happens. But then something like that does. And so it's essentially the opposite of a video game, right? In a video game, there's sort of like constant progress, and you're always getting this sort of like, reward stimulus intentionally, right? Because they designed the video game to make you play more. And the real world's not like that. Working in a lab is not like that. So, but that's good. But again, that's good training for the brain in preparation for being a physician and treating people with diseases. So, okay, so that's what you're doing in the lab is you're getting along with people. You're doing a poster opportunity just as an opportunity to do it, so that you can write it on your resume that you created and presented X poster. I mean, that's a major part of science, is sharing your scientific findings on a poster. we talked about, okay, things that you're going to do to expose yourself to more clinical medical care, whether it's be wheeling patients around a hospital, being a candy striper, working as an EMT. That's fine, but maybe just do that for one summer. You can't do that for 4 summers and think that that's going to be like this really good looking thing on your application to medical school. So it's going to be working in the lab. Okay, other extracurriculars. Okay, so volunteer work, service work. Okay, so here's why. So yes, absolutely, you would do this. I would say that research is number 1. Some sort of like exposure would be like number 2, and then some sort of like service work would be number 3. Oh, all of these things, by the way, are extracurriculars that come after getting good grades, right? The getting good grades is a given. Like, you just have to do that. Like, there's no way that you can extracurricularize your way to overcome bad grades. Like, there's no way you're going to have such amazing extracurriculars that they're like, well, we don't really care about your C's in biology and organic chemistry. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, it would be better to get B's in organic chemistry and biology and have like no volunteer experience than getting C's with all this wonderful. I mean, you got to show that you've got the academic chops to pull off being in medical school, because they don't want you flunking out. Okay, so volunteer work, service work. Do whatever volunteer service work. It does not matter if it's hard, if it's easy, if it's overseas, if it's domestic, if it's 20 minutes a week, if it's 2 hours a week, if it's only monthly. The thing that I did this thing called Alternative Spring Break, where we did a service project over spring break. One year we went to Cleveland, the other year we went to Boston. And it was awesome. And again, notice I did the timing intentionally so that it would not get in the way of my studies, right? Well, spring break, there's no studies anyway. So I'm like, oh, what a great opportunity to do service work, because it's not going to pull me away from studying. And the reason you want to do the service work in terms of getting into medical school, the real reason why it's helpful is because, one, of course, it acts as a signal that you are concerned about others, because of course they want to see applicants for medical school who are concerned about others and are just not selfish jerks. Okay, so it's a signal that you are concerned about the well-being of others. Okay, good. That's good. The other key that volunteer and service work has is that it gives you interesting life experiences with people that are not like yourself. And you're going to need to write these essays for getting into medical school. And those essays need to be about things that really happen, not about fiction. And those essays need to be interesting. And in order to write an interesting essay, you need to lead an interesting life. You cannot write an interesting essay unless you have had an interesting life. Okay? It's impossible. Now, you can have an interesting life and write a horrible essay because you're a horrible writer. That's certainly possible. But in order to write an interesting essay, you have to have an interesting life. Like Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway was a fantastic writer because he had an interesting life. Now, volunteering is a fantastic way to have an interesting life. Partying with the dudes is not an interesting life. Okay, I'm sorry. Partying with the dudes is not an interesting life. Now, you might be a college athlete. And so, frankly, between your studies and your athletics, you might not have time to volunteer. That's okay. Listen, that's okay. You can't do everything. Like I said, I didn't play intramural sports. I didn't do necessarily arts-related things. And I certainly didn't party my first 2 years of college. So you can't do everything. Now, those interesting experiences are going to be with, sometimes it's going to be volunteering for kids, sometimes it's going to be volunteering for the elderly, sometimes it's going to be volunteering for the poor, sometimes it's going to be volunteering for immigrants, sometimes it's going to be volunteering in a foreign country. But you want these interesting experiences. You want these interesting experiences, and you want to be able to have material for you to write these essays for medical school. One of the essays is just the personal statement, right? You need to have an interesting life in order to write an interesting personal statement. And volunteering is the way you have that interesting life, right? I've already talked about how you have this sort of monastic lifestyle, being by yourself with your nose in a book all the time. So you can't write an essay about how you had your nose in a book all the time and how you studied so hard to get that A- on your organic chemistry final. Like that is not essay material. So that's why the extracurriculars and the volunteering are also so important, is because you need to have this material to write about. So we talked about research, we talked about clinical exposure, we talked about volunteer service work, and that's where I'm going to end the extracurriculars for helping you get into medical school. I hope you found this helpful. Again, this is Dr. Eric Bricker with A Healthcare Z, and I just wish you all the best in your journey towards getting into medical school. Bye.